going on, everybody? Welcome, welcome. Hope everyone is doing fantastic this evening. We are picking up here with an update on the tropics here with Hurricane Erin. We are definitely going to be doing another update for you guys. We also got some new information in the tropics and everything like that we're going to get into. But anyways, everybody, hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone's having a fantastic Thursday evening. Let's see what we got here so far. We have Dotch, we have Mark, and Misty, of course, already here. And of course, everybody else who is just tuning in and, just not talking. Hopefully you guys are doing good as well. So, like I mentioned, we do have a new update for you guys here on the tropics here with Erin as well as the other systems here. I just noticed this looks like a little bit of a smiley face out here. Look at this. We got ourselves the one disturbance, got ourselves another disturbance, and of course we got the big old smile here going on. That is certainly very interesting. But yeah, there is 3 other areas that we are monitoring here, y'all. In addition to Erin. Erin is still causing some impacts, but is pulling away from the U.S. coast. They actually added tropical storm warnings in effect for Bermuda. Here, let me go ahead and bring you guys back over here. So the last couple of days here, we were watching, and they had those tropical storm watches in effect out there. In which you can see right here, in the blue here, this is Bermuda. We still do have that tropical storm warning in effect. So that is now a warning rather than a watch that was there. They did remove they finally removed the watches and warnings for North Carolina and Virginia. Those are no longer in place since the system has since steered its way out here, far away from the Mid-Atlantic coast. So currently. Those tropical storm conditions are subsiding. However, we are still going to be seeing a lot of strong rip currents as well as some big waves here. Probably still lingering for a while here, but yeah, like I mentioned though, Bermuda, yeah, we definitely do have ourselves some warnings in place now. Yesterday, last time we did an update on this here, it was a watch. We are now up to a warning here. Jesse, coming in with a $2 super chat, man. Thank you. Saying, let's see, salute. Well, there's a thing popping up in front of your message here. Let's see, action is picking up. It sure is, my friend. It sure is. Thank you for the $2, man. I appreciate that. Greatly appreciated. But yeah, so we do have warnings in place for Bermuda. Once again, they did remove all the warnings and watches out here from the Mid-Atlantic coast. So, currently no active tropical warnings or watches anymore for the United States. However, surges still going to be quite possible. So in the latest surge map here, we still do have that 2 to 4 foot storm surge out here by eastern North Carolina, from Duck to Cape Lookout here, as well as 1 to 2 foot of storm surge up here towards Long Island. You can see so coastal Long Island, we're going to be seeing a good 1 to 2 foot of storm surge out here. Out there by coastal New Jersey, we're kind of in the realm here of 1 to 3 foot storm surge being possible, which does lead its way all the way down here throughout coastal Maryland, coastal Delaware, and into the Chesapeake area. So, definitely still got that storm surge concern. We are definitely still going to be seeing, a bit of water rolling in. It's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take a little bit of time for things to cool down a bit. The waters, they're pretty rough right now, and they're going to at least take several days for things to really start to come back to normal here. But yeah, so currently right now, y'all, looking at the top left of the screen, we are Category 2 right now, sustained winds of 100 miles an hour. The system is expected to rapidly start weakening here pretty soon, as it does kind of work its way into stronger wind shear, drier air, and eventually working its way into some cooler waters here, which is going to allow for the system to really start to, weaken overall, which is good. But right now we are in a lower end Category 2 storm. Once again, 100 mile an hour sustained winds, moving northeast at 20 miles an hour, and the central low is down to 952 millibars here overall. And obviously, we are gusting a little bit heavier, than 100, but right now we're sustained here towards the core at 100 miles an hour here overall. So, on the forecast track, system's going to continue pulling northeast for the next several days. Once again, we do have the jet stream that's going to really start taking the storm away here. increasing the wind shear, allowing for the storm to also really start to weaken. So the system's just going to continue pushing its way here relatively to the northeast. The core of the storm is going to remain just south of Nova Scotia, south of Newfoundland. So these areas are going to be relatively okay in terms of direct impacts here. We are expecting to remain a hurricane, though, for at least the next few days. And it's not until we really approach kind of the afternoon of the 24th, which would be here for Sunday, so kind of Sunday afternoon, is when in the forecast we expect this thing to be downgraded from a hurricane to a tropical storm here. And in the extended range, you can see the system just continues pushing its way far up here into into the northern waters, which at this point in time, those waters are super cold. No chance of any development or strengthening. It's going to be in some really, really strong wind shear. There's going to be a lot of dry air getting into it. It's going to be over colder waters. It's just going to be in very bad conditions for anything tropical. But you can see everything's just west of England here for the most part as of right now, and we're just going to have to continue monitoring it. But for the most part, should not really be too much of a significant issue at this point beyond. But, like one thing I mentioned, a minute ago is that, those waters, they're still going to be pretty rough for a while. It's going to take a little bit of time for those to really start to, subside, really start to kind of, slow down and stuff like that. So we got to keep that in mind. Let's see here. Did I see the storm surge yesterday? It was high on the coast. I did see videos, yes. It was pretty rough out there by North Carolina. Absolutely. Out there by Outer Banks region got hit pretty hard from what it looked like. Let's see. What's it look like for the system heading towards Bermuda? So we actually have a greater probability of development here on that system. We now have an overall 80% chance of formation with a new tropical system. So this is a possibility of development in the next 7 days. So the next week, we have an 80% chance of a new depression or tropical storm being there. And in terms of the next 48 hours, the next 2 days, we have an overall 60% chance. So in the next little bit, there is going to be a possibility that we could see another system develop here. We're going to get the models for that here in a moment. We actually have a new disturbance here. This is just a little low 20% chance. I'm going to go and bring up satellite view. You guys can see there's really not a whole lot to it. It's just a little bit of convection here. Yeah, really not a lot. Really not super impressive here. But the Hurricane Center, they do have a 20% chance of development here in the next 7 days and in the next 48 hours. So, that is possible. Maybe we could get a little bit of a something, developing out of this here. But honestly, really not seeing too much concern with that. Then we work our way down into that southern storm, well southwest of the Cabo Verde at this point in time. This system has also increased in probability here, but it doesn't have much time. We have a 50-50 shot, basically, of development here overall. Throughout the next 7 days, we have a 50% chance of the system becoming, a tropical depression or a tropical storm here in the next 7 days, as well as the next 48 hours. Also clocking in here at a 50% chance probability here overall. So, honestly, look at the system now. You can see that we do have some, still some decent convection going on with it. We got a little bit of some circulation going on. Not really super defined right now, but the system is gradually working, its way to the west here overall. I don't expect much out of this system, to be honest. Models, this is 99L. Models have this thing just continually rolling westward here. So here is the models on that system. The system's just going to continue working its way over here to the west overall. Some of the models having it kind of going near the Antilles here, several days out from now. But there's really not a whole lot of guidance on this system. And if we take a look here at the spaghetti models here overall, regarding the strength here, the same models, just, looking at strength here now on the map, and you can see that, we're just going to see a bit of sustainment, maybe some slow development. I mean, there's a couple of models that suggest maybe down in time it could become a tropical storm, but there's really not a lot of guidance on that. And then, of course, you can see a lot of the models actually just have it, just slowly disintegrating the further we go down in time. Conditions don't really appear super conducive for, big time development or anything like that. So, given this system here, the one that's, just well off to the west coast of Africa, disturbance here. This one I'm not really concerned about. The one that we definitely need to monitor here is going to be this guy. I believe this is 90L now. I think it's gotten an invest number, in which it indeed has. You know what? There's a pretty good amount of support here with this. Looking at the early spaghetti models here, you can actually see, this is a system that Bermuda should honestly really start watching here. Can't really see it, but Bermuda is here behind some of these areas out there. I can't see. I'm pretty sure Bermuda is somewhere over in here. It can't see it because the spaghetti models were kind of taken over. But yeah, I mean, we do need to monitor it. Bermuda should definitely be monitoring this next system. This is officially an invest here. This is 90L. So that is the latest 18 UTC runs here of the hurricane models. Now, believe it or not, model guidance has picked up quite a bit. On this system. Kind of developing here, you can see that over time, the majority of the models here gradually show some strengthening occurring, and you can actually see there's a handful of models. Actually, most of the hurricane models here from this run do suggest us, getting up into maybe hurricane status here. Definitely does look quite possible. So, there is a really good shot that this system, could easily get into tropical storm, as well as, maybe hurricane status. We're going to have to monitor that. But yeah, this is another system we're going to have to monitor. Looking at it now on satellites, yesterday there really wasn't a whole lot of circulation going on. But if you look closely, you can actually see we do have a little bit of circulation popping off. Convection's not very much centered here. It's very disorganized still, you can see. But we do have a lot of good convection with the system here. You can see that circulation. It's got to organize a little bit better here before it really does anything. But models have this thing progressing to the northwest over the next few days, possibly working its way out there towards Bermuda. And overall probability has increased quite a bit. Over the next 7 days, we have an 80% chance of this thing becoming either a depression or a storm. And throughout the next 48 hours, we have an overall 60% chance probability here of this thing becoming a tropical depression or a tropical storm. So that definitely seems quite possible overall. So we'll certainly keep an eye out there for that. Now, just a little bit of a thing here I wanted to mention too. The Eastern Pacific, we got a disturbance here that we're also monitoring. This has an overall 50% chance of development in the next 7 days or the next week. However, the next 48 hours, the next 2 days, we're not expecting any development to occur with this system. So it's going to be a little bit longer before that one becomes a really big concern. But, if even it becomes a concern. But yeah, I mean, the main thing we got to keep an eye out there for is, once again, Erin, as it continues working its way northeast, pulling away from the United States here, which is good. And then, of course, we have Invest 90L now, which we're actually going to hop into the models here and take a peek at now to kind of see what we're looking at here. So, with that being said, let's hop on over here to the spaghetti models, we looked at spaghetti models. Let's actually look at the individual models here. So this is the HWRF model. This is the 18 UTC run here. Times in the top left, you guys want to follow along. Now, as we work our way down in time, the HWRF has some, gradual strengthening with the system here, really starting to pick up here pretty much for the later 22nd going into the 23rd here. You can see HWRF definitely suggests, holy cow, HWRF definitely suggests this thing becoming, easily a tropical storm, if not even a hurricane. Here you can see the pressure, according to the HWRF, possibly getting down into the 960s from this run here. And you can see Bermuda, this system could be a little bit more of a concern for Bermuda. Definitely do need my Bermuda folks to be watching this one here. But you can see, the system, it is a relatively compact system here, but like I mentioned, Bermuda should definitely be monitoring this here as, it could be another round of tropical trouble here that we need to certainly be looking out there for. But looking over out the infrared view, you can see that, HWRF does have some pretty, some pretty decent development here on this system here overall. Definitely looks pretty good according to this model here. So, moisture-wise, looking at the moisture levels and stuff like that, it doesn't seem like moisture is going to be too much of an issue. For the most part, the system does, hold a lot of moisture. which, could really keep the storm relatively organized and everything like that. There is going to be a little bit of dry air on the western side over the next few days here. But beyond that point, from the HWRF, it looks like we're going to continue to hold a pretty good amount of moisture here overall. Chris says, "Hey Andrew, how's it going? Let's see, North Carolina was hammered by those huge waves the other day. One of the storm chasers was live streaming and looking at the angry ocean. Yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of people streaming that. I'm sure it was pretty rough out there. Yeah, I was seeing a lot of that, videos and stuff like that coming through on Twitter. But yeah." Let's see. Severe weather looks interesting today. 2 more storms are going up. Do we have anything big severe weather today? We do have a slight risk today. We got a level 2 threat up in Minnesota and South Dakota, a little bit of North Dakota too. We got a 2% tornado risk here, 15 hail, and a 15 wind threat, non-significant. So, yeah, a little bit of severe weather up in the northern plains here in the upper Midwest could be quite possible. Just typical thunderstorms today in this, in the deep south. Typical, for this time of the year. But, anyways, so that's that. Let's see here. Glad we can breathe from the next invest from the mainland U.S. Yeah, that is true. Like I said, this one here, though, really could be a concern for, like I said, Bermuda. This system is going to be working fairly close. Bermuda does need to definitely be watching this one. Now, switching up the model here, we're going to hop over to the HMON here. This is the Haman model here. I don't think the HMON has... Oh, here we go. Never mind. We do have 90L. So according to HMON, also showing some gradual development. Look at that. Wow. That system gets really close to Bermuda, according to the HMON. The HMON actually does support a bit of drier air being a bit of a concern, possibly limiting the storming as we kind of approach out there by Bermuda. As you can see, a lot of the deep moisture here is indicated in the bluish green colors here. You can see, and across the brownish tan colors, this is where you see a lot of dry air, which is not really good for tropical systems. But, HMON, does have the system, gradually picking up some strength here too. There's a surprising amount of strength here really showing this system picking up here. And like I said, Bermuda could be right in the crosshairs here. So once again, my Bermuda folks, y'all need to watch this. HMON has a system impacting on the 25th out there by Bermuda. Remember, this is not guaranteed, but it is something that Bermuda does absolutely need to watch out for. And looking overall at the lower dynamics here, you can see that, Bermuda could definitely get in some pretty rough conditions out there, if the system really does materialize here. HMON definitely picking up a little bit aggressive here. Now we're working our way over here into the HAFS. Let's see. I don't think we actually have... Yeah, we don't have 90L for HAFS-A. HAFS-B we do. So we'll go ahead and load up that. So the HAFS-B model, has this thing gradually strengthening here. This model has it just west of Bermuda, however, still getting a little close for comfort here. The good news is that this system is a lot smaller, comparing to Erin. This thing, you could fit like probably 20 of these things inside of Erin. As you can see, it's definitely pretty small, when comparing to Erin here. But according to the HFSB model, you can see that the system could get pretty close to Bermuda too. I think Bermuda is like 20-something miles long and like 2 miles across. So you can see this is a relatively smaller system here. This is, not really anything super crazy. But yeah, HAFSB, though, does support the system, picking up some strength here. And kind of similar to the other model here that we were looking at. I think the HMON we were looking at a minute ago. Dry air could be a bit of a concern as we go out there towards Bermuda. You can see a bit of drier air on the top right here of the map. Out there by Bermuda, could allow for a bit of dry conditions, which would, possibly stunt and weaken, some tropical activity. Could be quite possible. So that's HAFSB. I think that's really all we have except for the main global models now. Like we got the GFS here. The thing is, though, about the GFS is that, the GFS or some of these global models have a little bit of a hard time, quote unquote, seeing smaller tropical systems here. This is where the main hurricane models really do shine. But, You know what, though? GFS actually picks up on it pretty good. As you can see on the 18 UTC run here, you can see that the GFS does have that system, potentially becoming a tropical storm, if not a hurricane even. As it kind of approaches out there, that little speck there, that is Bermuda. The GFS does have this system coming up right up on Bermuda here, so, there's a bit of support there. The ECMWF here, the Euro model, does show this system developing too, but not really much more of a depression, according to the Euro. Keeping that low actually east of Bermuda here, and having that low really not super strong here at 1,012 millibars. This is one of the models that kind of supports this thing not really doing a whole lot, essentially. Then, of course, we have CMC here. The CMC model, does pick up on the system. A little bit stronger than Euro, but kind of similar path, just remaining east of Bermuda here. So we got some models going west of Bermuda, some going east of Bermuda, some going over Bermuda. Regardless, Bermuda does really need to look out for this upcoming system. I think this one here, actually might be a bit of a concern. Maybe a little bit more of a concern than Erin was, essentially. Like I mentioned with this storm, this one's a lot smaller and a lot more compact, according to the models here. It ain't going to be like a beast like Erin. I mean, Erin's a massive storm. I mean, Erin is huge. Wind field of Erin is unbelievable. And you can see this system is just going to be a little bit of a relatively compact type of tropical cyclone here. So, things are a little bit different between those two. But, still some gradual development possible. Then lastly, we got the Icon here. Icon model, doesn't really pick up a whole lot on it. It does show that little trough here. But yeah, Icon's pretty, weak on this system here. Doesn't really have much happening. Now, really the main guidance that we need to go off of at this point is those hurricane models for the most part. We do need to look at those hurricane models here a little bit closer because, they can take things in depth a little bit better given, that it's a relatively small system and, the hurricane models have a pretty good idea in terms of in terms of what it could do. Now, looking at the GFS ensembles or the GEFS tracks here, you can actually see that, the system doesn't really pose a threat for the United States here, which is good. System's going to go continually northwest, eventually turning its way to the north. And then, of course, working its way out there to the North Atlantic here. So, before anybody asks, no, this is not expected to be a concern for the United States. However, like I mentioned, Bermuda could certainly be under a bit of a concern here. So, my Bermuda folks out there, we do need you guys to be monitoring this storm very, very closely. Then, of course, once again, this is the spaghetti models here. This is the main hurricane models, the ones that we should really look at. In which you can actually see, the majority of the models, they do agree on the system, just pulling northwest, eventually, gaining that northerly track. Still a little bit uncertain, in terms of where the center of that storm could go. You can see there is definitely a bit of spacing out there, a little bit of disagreement. The UKXI model, a little bit of an outcast here, considering it's acting against literally all the other models. But, kind of given that line of best fit, that median point here, for the most part, yeah, we are going to see northwesterly movement for the next, at least 2 to 3 days before, 3+ days out. We're going to really start tracking north and eventually northeast here. The system, continues to work out there towards, like, Bermuda, like we mentioned here overall. So, Bermuda definitely need you folks to be monitoring this one. In terms of the intensity guidance here from the hurricane models here, on this next system, you can actually see here that, a really good amount of, model support does have this thing becoming a named storm, becoming a tropical storm here, and actually even most of the models do support even a hurricane, developing out of this system here, which I wouldn't doubt it, given the latest guidance that we have, both from the the hurricane models, the global models, and all that. I mean, we definitely do have a pretty good amount of support here of this thing, becoming, likely a small hurricane. It seems quite possible. So we'll definitely need to look out there for that. Let's see here. Where y'all from in the chat? I am from Lakeland, Florida. That is where I'm at right now. Misty says there's a tornado warning. Let me look real quickly. I think there is one. You can see it on my tally there. Oh, look at that. We got a lot of hurricane warnings still in effect. A lot of coastal tropical storm warnings in effect here. I have no idea where's that tornado warning at here. Do I not have it on? Let's do severe. Yeah, tornado warnings are on here. For some reason, it's not pulling up here. Maybe it's a new warning? Anyways, but yeah, moving on. But yeah, like I mentioned, though, we do just need to monitor that here. There is definitely a pretty good amount of support here with that system at this point. Models have certainly trended in favor of this system here, really developing overall. So, Daly says, thank you for your time, Andrew. Great work. Yeah, no problem. You're very welcome. Like I mentioned.
Unlock your iPhone first.
Siri, I'm not talking to you. But you're very welcome. You're very, very welcome. Technology, dude, I tell you. But I'm glad to help you guys out, and that's going to be the next big thing in the news that you guys are going to hear is this system, for Bermuda. But it wouldn't hurt if you're out there in Bermuda to just make sure you're ready for hurricane season. You should be already, but for the system, it wouldn't hurt for Bermuda to start really watching this system here. I wouldn't be surprised if if we continue at this rate, that Bermuda could actually be somewhat impacted here overall. So hopping back over to the HRF model, I do want to bring up the 90L again. So once again, it now has an invest here. Hopping back over to the models here, you can see HWRF does show some pretty rapid development here, and it actually does have that system coming right up to Bermuda here. Now, this is not a guarantee of this thing directly hitting Bermuda like this, but it cannot be ruled out at this point in time. There is a little bit of guidance that supports it, getting really close, if not making direct landfall over Bermuda. That we cannot rule out at this time, in which, Bermuda should definitely start looking into this storm here and, really should definitely start, monitoring it here. The HRF model, HWRF, does have a pretty aggressive looking hurricane developing. Once again, this is a relatively small hurricane too. The system, according to most of these models here, is actually expected to be relatively small, especially, kind of comparing to Erin, as we were talking about here a little bit ago. Erin's a beast. Erin is huge, and its wind field is absolutely massive. Spreads a huge distance overall. But, in terms of, this system up, I think this is Fernand. Is that how you say that name? I'm going to have to figure that out. But the next system here, this one is going to possibly, likely be just a lot more compact here. But, once again, Bermuda should definitely monitor it. Bermuda right there could be in the crosshairs for this storm system here. But anyways, that's that. So that's the HRF. The moisture levels, according to the HWRF, doesn't appear to be too much of an issue. Over the next 2 days or so, we could have a little bit of dry air on the far western side of the storm here. Eventually, the HRF model does show, the system kind of maintaining a pretty good amount of moisture here. It's not very linear to the other models, though. Like, for example, HMON here, if we take a look at 90L, you can actually see that, the HMON does actually show a bit of dry air infiltration on the western side of the storm system here for the 25th. So the brownish tan color, this is indicating dry air. And the bluish green color, this is indicating, moisture-filled air, tons of moisture in the environment, which is, moisture is certainly needed for tropical cyclones to thrive, strengthen, sustain themselves. And a bit of dry air can be a bit problematic here, according to the model. Once again, HWRF doesn't really show it. HMON, still keeps it in some pretty good amounts of moisture, but once again, HMON also does have this thing getting really close to Bermuda out here. So, that's something we need to certainly look into. But, once again, we'll just continue monitoring it here. This is really the first run of the models here for the system here overall. And it's definitely looking pretty interesting, something we do need to look out for. The HFSA model, you can actually see here the HFSA does have maybe a bit of dry air on the right-hand side of the storm system. It's a little bit uncertain, with the the dry air infiltration and stuff like that. Essentially where it's going to be in place and what it essentially will do. There is a bit of uncertainty here, but Like the other models here, the HAFS-8 does have that system getting pretty close to Bermuda here. Definitely not as strong, at least in the beginning. According to the HAFS-8 model, it actually picks up a little bit of strength once it passes over Bermuda. So, as you guys can really tell between the models, there's still a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of stuff we don't fully know at this point. It's not really, fine-tuned at this moment. You have a lot of models that show it stronger than others. A lot of models show, a bit of dry air being a concern. Some models show it on the west side. Some models show it on the, the right-hand side or the east side. And some models have this thing going over Bermuda. Some have it just west. Some have it just east. It's very, very iffy right now. So models do need to work that out. But like I mentioned, certainly is a system that we do absolutely need to monitor here. So anyways, well, that's really that. Once again, that system overall, here, hopping you guys back over here, that's this guy, in which we have an overall 80% chance of development. That's likely going to occur at this point in time. We definitely do need to be monitoring this here throughout the next 7 days. We have an 80% chance of overall development here, into either a depression or a tropical storm. And then throughout the next 48 hours, we do have a 60% chance probability here of development here, either into a tropical depression or a tropical storm. So this is likely going to be the next named storm here, in which it is Fernand. I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce it. But we'll definitely figure that out before it happens. But that is likely going to be the next named storm. Once again, we got another little area here, 20% chance of development overall. I don't see much happening out of this guy. Honestly, models don't really pick up much on it. I'm surprised the Hurricane Center even put anything on it. But yeah, a little system here. Not really doing much. Then this guy, once again, southwest of the Cabo Verde, we have an overall 50% chance probability of development here. It only has a few days in which the window is open for the system to, potentially become a depression, maybe a short-lived depression or storm. We'll have to see. But my hopes really aren't super high for this system here, honestly. My eyes are obviously going to be on this guy. This is the one that we really need to actually monitor. And of course, Erin. Erin's still not completely out of the woods yet. The system is pulling further away from the U.S. It's still still causing some impacts. Once again, Bermuda actually under a tropical storm warning now, like we mentioned here in the beginning of the stream here. The system is, still causing a bit of problems out there. Even those waters are still extremely rough, and they're going to be very, very, very rough for the next several days overall. Now, looking at the graphics here, the current wind field, you guys can see just how massive the wind field here is, the estimated wind field here. So the yellow indicating that tropical storm force winds, basically 39 miles an hour to 74 miles an hour, I believe, or 73, between there. And then, of course, you have the red. This is that hurricane force winds. That's where we're seeing like 74 or greater. In which, given the current, stats of it, you guys can see in the top left, that's the latest information. Category 2 storm, low end Cat 2, 100 mile an hour sustained winds, moving northeast at 20 miles an hour, and the pressure is down to 952 millibars. So system is definitely starting to weaken a bit here, because of multiple reasons. Once again, we have a lot of dry air starting to get to the storm here. That strong wind shear that's starting to get to the storm, starting to destabilize it, starting to kind of rip it apart. And then, of course, even the cooler waters, it's really going to start to work its way into some cold waters as we continue tracking northeast here with Erin, which is going to really allow for the system to, further just destabilize and, eventually fade out here. But, in terms of the warning stuff, like I mentioned, they did cancel those tropical storm warnings in effect that were for North Carolina and Virginia. Those are no longer in effect here. They did cancel those. But like we mentioned, for the longest time, Bermuda had tropical storm watches. Now we're in tropical storm warnings here from the system. You can see the estimated tropical storm conditions are just shy of Bermuda here. Definitely could be seeing some moments in which we could be getting up to tropical storm force, in which, Bermuda is under that warning for a reason here. So that's that. And, regardless, like I mentioned, with those waves out there, the waves are still a really, really big concern here. If we hop away over here back to the models here, y'all, taking a peek back at the GFS, looking at those lower dynamics here and that wave height here, at the current moment, kind of where we're at right now, we are seeing absolutely massive waves out there in the Atlantic here. Still a lot of coastal concerns ongoing here. We're still going to be feeling this for quite a few days, actually. That rip current concern is probably going to be there for quite a few days. So I would avoid a lot of the beaches here across the U.S. East Coast for, at least a half a week or so. Because the fallout's still going to be there for a while here. You can actually see maybe that other system, we're monitoring too. This one could be a concern for Bermuda out there, which we'll have to just kind of see how that goes. But, speaking of Bermuda, though, with this system here, the GFS, does suggest Bermuda could be getting into, a good maybe 15-foot waves or so, maybe 15 to 20-foot waves. According to the GFS, the Euro, on the other hand, not super far off as well. Upwards of 15 to 20-foot waves could be quite possible. So, Bermuda does need to look out there for that, and I'm sure you guys are kind of getting a lot of that right now. A lot of the waves are going to really start picking up. Some of the peak of it's going to be pretty much for, very soon, actually, like later this evening here, which a lot of the worst of it's actually probably already starting to happen out there by Bermuda here, according to where the models have this thing in place here. So, there is that. But other than that, we could see some low-end tropical storm force conditions. The Euro model, you can see showing some of the strongest winds here being for this evening, in which, right around now or so, within the next couple of hours, the worst conditions are going to be felt. According to the ECMWF, we do have a 35-knot wind barb here. This is at 11 p.m. For today. Is suggesting low-end tropical storm conditions here. GFS, on the other hand, kind of showing, the system here overall. Grabbing another little sounding here from the GFS, actually just shy of tropical storm force. 30-knot sustained winds, gusting into tropical storm force, but just just sub-sustained for the most part here. So a little bit of guidance, like we mentioned, the warning is in place regardless. Some low-end tropical storm conditions is certainly expected. And some of the worst of it is going to be for the waves that we really need to look out there for. Let's see, hurricane season is very active. It's picking up. It sure is. When will the new model runs come out for the system? Well, they are running now, given it is 0 UTC. It could take up to 2 to 4 hours to process that data. It usually takes a while, a couple of hours after the initial run. We have each run typically every 6 hours. We have the 18 UTC run, the 0 UTC, the 06, and the 12 UTC run. Right now we're at 0 UTC. It's 0:39 UTC, which is 8:38 or 8:39 p.m. In which the model should be running now, but we're not going to really receive that data until everything's processed here, which will take a couple of hours essentially. So, but anyways, but if you guys have any questions, feel free to let us know. Once again, the good news is that the system from here on out is just going to pretty much continue pulling away from the U.S. Coast here. System's going to really start weakening here pretty soon. Once again, right now it is a Category 2, very low-end Category 2, almost in the Category 1 realm. Still, quite a beast. It still is a very large system, and it still is very, very much impactful. Tons of waves, tropical storm conditions in some areas here. Certainly something that we do need to look out there for. Out there by some of the coastal regions of like Nova Scotia, winds could pick up a little bit here. Shouldn't be anything massive though. Just a little bit of strong winds across some of the coastal areas here. Same thing out there kind of by like Cape Cod area. We could pick up some pretty gusty winds out for some of those regions here, but they should remain subtropical force, subtropical storm force. So that'll definitely be pretty good here. But anyways, yeah, that's really about all that's going on here in the tropics that we need to look at. Once again, we really did a deep dive into that new system, 90L. 99L, like we mentioned here, I'm not really too impressed with that storm here. Hopping back over to 99L. Gradual westerly movement, is expected, with that system out there. It has an overall 50% chance of development here, possibly into a weak depression. Models really don't take this thing super far. As you can kind of see, majority of the guidance has it just subtropical storm force, with a couple of models, actually showing maybe some development far down in time. It's a little unknown to tell, but, models, not really picking up too much on 90L or 99L here. But 90L, like I mentioned, the new invest that we have, this one, hey, man, we got a pretty good possibility on that one here. Definitely need to keep a close eye out there for that one. This one does have a pretty good concern, possibly for areas like, Bermuda. So my heads up to my folks out in Bermuda here. Chris says, side topic, not hurricane/tropical storm related, but still regarding weather. I saw a recent temperature outlook with the dark blue areas over the Midwest for below average temperatures. Yes. Not just the Midwest either. Let me actually bring that up for you. CPC, I think this program I use has it. The Climate Prediction Center has indeed highlighted a pretty decent area here. Let's hop over to Outlooks. Let's see, CPC. I'm pretty sure. Here we go. Temperature. There you are. Let's turn off the MEDAR here. It's actually for a lot of the country, as you guys can kind of tell here. Let's. How do I disable this here? I guess we'll just do that maybe. Does that get rid of it? Nope. I guess not. Let me uncheck it maybe. Hopefully I can. How do we select? Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Yeah, so look at that. There's the CPC outlook. So it's not just for the Midwest. This goes all throughout the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, really cooling down things. Days 8 to 14 is still a little bit cooler than typical. But yeah, we are in some deep blue here. That gives it 70% chance of temperature being below normal across that darkest shade of blue, which, includes Central Plains, Midwest, Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and a bit of the Northeast too. And then you got Florida, which Florida's where I'm at. We're above average, which is, typical. But yeah, this does not really include Florida. So the gray areas here, you see, this is basically just kind of normal, normal temperatures essentially. Pacific Northwest, the PNW actually is a bit warmer though, as you can see, 80% chance of above normal up there for like Washington State. Could be a little bit more warmer up in the Pacific Northwest, but literally about 80% of the country is going to be a lot colder throughout days 6 to 8. So 6 days out from now to 10 days out from now. So basically a week to a week and a half or so out. We are talking some cooler temperatures. Absolutely. What's up, Cheryl? Good to see you. Let's see, fall-like temperatures. Perhaps fall is coming a bit earlier than we thought. I think it's just a cold spell, to be honest with you. It is still August. August is a very, very warm month for a lot of us. September, still pretty warm for the most part. It's not really until October where you really start to cool down. You start noticing a big difference. And then October, November, some areas start introducing snow. December, continue shifting south. Believe it or not, y'all, we're going to have our winter forecast out here very soon. I'm planning within the next 2 weeks to have the official winter forecast out, so I need to work on that soon because, this is typically right around the time. I usually upload it for the last day of the month of August, so we'll have that winter forecast out for you guys. I'm sure a lot of y'all are going to be really excited to see that, and including me. So, but me being here in Central Florida, I ain't gonna get none more than likely, But yeah, we'll get that winter forecast out for you guys soon. Absolutely. But anyways, folks, honestly, probably going to cut it a little bit early tonight, like I mentioned, because we already went over everything. There's really not a whole lot more to talk about. If you guys do want to, if y'all have any questions, and do want to share them or ask me, throw them down in the chat. This is kind of a last little call here if you guys have any questions overall. Yeah, absolutely. See, you're going to ask whether or not this winter will be similar to last winter or will be less impactful in some areas. It'll be different. It won't be completely the same as it was last year. I did read the Farmer's Almanac. They did mention that it's going to be very snowy this year. I'm going to have to do some analysis and, some deep dives, in the Pacific Oscillation and, NAO and stuff like that. And we're going to touch up on that whenever we get to it. But yeah, let's see here. Awesemo says, just got here. Anyone got a quick rundown? So a little bit of a brief summary. A bit of cool conditions, expected across the country for the next, for days 6 to 10 we were just talking about. Erin, still a Category 2, rapidly weakening, though, as it is encountering some strong wind shear and dry air starting to get into the storm. Eventually, those cooler waters as well will become a big problem for the system. From here on out, system's going to weaken here. Currently sustained at 100 miles an hour, moving northeast at 20 miles an hour, pressure down to 952 millibars. Tropical storm warnings have been expired for North Carolina and Virginia. However, Bermuda, we got a tropical storm warning still in effect here. Waves are at their strongest peak right now, essentially out there by Bermuda, and a lot of the northeast here. It's certainly pretty strong out there. System's going to continue working northeast here, remaining a hurricane for the next few days. Just remaining south of Nova Scotia, south of Newfoundland here. We got 3 disturbances, a bit of a smiley face going on here, as you guys can tell. This guy has an overall 20% chance of development. Not really expecting much out of this one here. The one southwest of Cabo Verde, not really impressed with it. Overall, 50% chance of development into a tropical depression or potential storm. Model guidance doesn't really have this thing, strengthening. I mean, there's a little bit of model guidance in the far extended future with maybe a little bit of strengthening, but majority of the models has this thing just remaining under tropical storm force as it continues working westward. Then lastly, the one that we really need to look into, this guy. This one has an overall 80% chance of development here, for becoming a tropical depression or a tropical storm here within the next 7 days. 48 hours, we have a 60% chance probability overall. This one, there's a lot of model guidance now that suggests, a potential hurricane developing. There's a pretty good amount of support here. For example, here's the spaghetti models here for that system. You can see definitely getting in the tropical storm force here. Pretty much all except for one outcast model suggests it, in which, it does get into even hurricane status. Pretty good amount of models support that. This could actually end up out there by Bermuda, in which Bermuda does need to be monitoring this here very, very closely. And other than that, that's basically a quick little summary of everything that's going on here. So hopefully you got all that information. If not, go back in the stream, rewind the live stream, because we talk about everything you guys need to know. We go in every model. We go in depth with everything. That's just a little bit of a summary of kind of what is essentially going on out there. Okay. But anyways, folks, well, that's probably going to wrap it up for now. But if you guys have any final questions before I roll off, throw it down in the chat. If not, we're going to go ahead and roll off here for now. So tomorrow on the table, we'll do the same thing. Once again, every day at 8 o'clock p.m., we're going to do a live stream here to keep you guys updated. Regardless of what's going on, we'll make sure to keep you guys informed. I'm going to try to do a video tomorrow. So we will see how that goes. No promises. Definitely a live stream though, regardless, every day at 8, regardless of what's going on, we'll, continue to give you guys updates and stuff like that. But yeah. Let's see. Osmo says thanks, and thanks for pronouncing my name right. You're very welcome. No problem at all. See you later, Cheryl. Thanks for joining. But all right, everybody. Well, that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. You guys have a wonderful rest of your night. Be careful, especially out there by Bermuda. Heads up to my Bermuda folks once again. Not just from Erin, but also 90L. That's now a concern. So Bermuda does need to be on the lookout here for the next several days. We'll keep you guys updated with everything. We'll have more guidance tomorrow. And alrighty, everybody. Well, just once again, thank you all for joining us. I really, really, really appreciate it. And if you guys are new to the channel, once again, consider leaving a like, hitting that subscribe button. It'd be greatly, greatly appreciated. And alrighty, everybody. Well, thank you all for joining. You guys take care. Have a wonderful rest of your night. Be careful. Try not to worry about the weather. I know there's a lot of stuff going on. Tropics have been picking up quite a bit. So, other than that. We'll keep you guys updated with everything. Once again, currently no danger for the United States tropical storm, tropical system related or anything like that. So, alrighty, everybody. Well, thanks for joining. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see y'all in the next one. Peace out, my friends. See ya later on.